Hey listeners, Leah here. Before you jump in, we wanted to share that the opinions and experiences expressed in this episode are those of mine and Jackie and do not represent the overarching opinions or beliefs of LinkedIn or Microsoft. Thanks so much, and we will see you on the other side.
Hey listeners, welcome to In the Arena. I'm Jackie Goldberg.
And I'm Leah Smart.
And today we are going to have one of the more real conversations that we've ever had on this podcast. Not to say that they're not all real, but when this podcast started, and many of our listeners know this, it really was a situation where Leah and I, two colleagues and good friends sitting on a couch, having a really deep conversation and recognizing that there is value in other people listening in and hearing what we have to say. And this week, today, is one of those days where there is a lot to be said and a lot of conversation to be had. You know, more recently in the past week or so, there's been some racist incidents. George Floyd and Christian Cooper are two that come to mind from this week. And then in the past few months, Ahmaud Arbery and the situation just being a jogger and a Black man. And it is unacceptable. And there's so much emotion that comes from this. And for me personally, as a white, Jewish, American woman, I woke up this morning and I realized that Leah, one of my best friends, who's a Black woman living in the States, I didn't even check in on her this week to see how she's doing. And, just being caught up all week in my job and my personal life, it really hit me that I want to have a conversation with her about how she's doing. So today we are going to have this conversation and share both of our thoughts, right, about what this means to us, where we're at, and really how we can be allies. Our mission of this podcast is humanizing work through real conversations. And not only is this a real conversation, but it's one that has to be had in the workplace. As a manager of a team, I know it is my duty, it is my responsibility to have this conversation. And it's also uncomfortable at times. And as an ally, I want to learn from Leah. I want to learn from the people around me on what I can do to speak up and what I can do to play a role in evolving our country and evolving the way that we look at racism and all that exists today. And so that's where we're at today. We did not prepare for this in any way. This is me and Leah having a conversation as if we were on our couch, checking in with one another as friends. And so here we go. So Leah, you mean so much to me. And, I just want to hear, how have you been doing this week? Where are you at? And just checking in.
Yeah. And I so appreciate you, Jackie, for checking in and, for being someone who knows that, it's you, like you said, it's my responsibility and my duty to do your best and to make changes in any corner of the world that you can. I personally, we'll talk more about the big picture stuff, but personally, this has been a really emotional last couple of days for me. And I tend to be someone who is fairly, I feel someone who isn't super emotional about this. I don't constantly beat this drum for a number of reasons. And I think it's really important to talk about some of those reasons a little bit later too. But, I don't really watch a lot of news. I'll be honest. I'm very thoughtful of not bringing a lot of this in. And the reason for me is I use the phrase, if you sit in mud for too long, you're going to get dirty. And so I really do take that seriously. And so I didn't find out about this until Wednesday. And, I shared on LinkedIn, I watched the video of George Floyd and I was probably in shock. And then yesterday, I went out for a run in the morning. I'm a big runner, and I had forgotten to run for Ahmaud Arbery, a few weeks ago or months ago. And I was like, I'm going to commit to running for him and running in honor of him, running unafraid. I'm fortunate that I don't feel fear when I run, but, I felt this feeling as I was running and finishing up. I was thinking about my children that I don't even have yet. And And I'm doing my best to not be heartbroken for them before they're even born. So, this is the first time I've gotten really emotional about this in a long time. And I think it's incredibly important to be open about the emotion because people, the more you know and the more you open yourself to empathy, even if you aren't going through this, we've all experienced loss. We've all experienced pain. We've all experienced suffering. And so the question is, how are you going to show up in empathy for the people that matter? And something that happened yesterday was I posted this on LinkedIn, and then I actually shared it with my bigger team, my org, and just said, hey, I want you all to see this and, please share. And what it started was an amazing thread of people sharing their own communities, like their own lives, their own stories. And I won't go into any of them in depth for sake of just keeping all that confidential. But it was beautiful and opening and heartbreaking. And it's like, I cry because I cried yesterday because I'm sad and because I just saw so many people start to open up and become more raw about their own experiences from saying, they had people in their family that are part of my community that they're afraid for, or, they don't know how to talk about this stuff. And so they just don't, and they want to learn how, or, there's just so many different perspectives. And so how I'm doing is this mix of I'm sad, I'm heartbroken. I feel kind of broken open and funny enough, I was on Wednesday having a therapy session about my own challenges within my own race. It was focused solely on, I have a Black therapist, it was focused solely on intraracial discrimination and how painful that is and the things I've carried forward from 20 years ago, honestly. And I was bawling my eyes out about that. And I was like, what an interesting, I don't even know if the word's dichotomy, but what an interesting dichotomy, two things, like two different days, so similar, both so painful. And it's just been an emotional week for me around the color of my skin, which is not something that I am often super emotional about.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. What do you think it is? Is it the recency of these events and how close they are together that makes it more charged than normal? Is there something else that's there that we haven't yet seen? Is it that more people are speaking up so it feels more prevalent? I'm curious how things maybe have shifted for you, even over the past, your life, right? Like how things have shifted and then what makes it more so right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably, if we go from the wide view, we're in the middle of COVID-19. We're sheltering in place. We're all at home. And as you and I have talked about, we're home alone, a lot of us. Even if you're with people, you might feel lonely. We're all kind of meeting our shadows. We're going into our stuff and we're looking at the things we don't like. We're seeing those things clearer than we ever have because we don't have the distraction. So I think that's the big picture. If I continue to zoom in, and this is my experience, what I think is really important when you talk about any community that's been marginalized, one of the hard things is as a Black woman, when I speak and a white person hears me, a lot of times they're hearing what they think they're hearing is the voice of an entire community. And what's really important is that, this is my voice, one voice. We all have very different experiences, lived experiences. So every story is going to sound different. And that's the beauty of this, right? We all have our own unique stories. I rejected my own Blackness for a long time. I was never the girl who was, the prettiest girl or the one with the hair people liked or with the body type that people like. I never. And funny enough, on my call with my therapist, we were talking about body image and she said, I have clients now who are crying and sad because they don't have big butts. I was like, I spent my whole childhood trying to figure out how to get rid of my big butt. But it's I make light of it, but really it is a really heartbreaking self-rejection that's created by conditioning that you're not enough, that you're not beautiful enough, you don't look good enough, you're not pretty enough. And so I spent so much of my young life trying to figure out how I could get out of that. I remember waking up and wishing that I was someone else, that I looked different, because life would just be easier and better. And like, I wouldn't have to deal with all this pain. And so, you know, it's only been in the last 3 or 4 years that I've really started to reckon with this. Like I haven't carried that feeling, but I've really started to look at it purposefully with the intention of healing. And so the reason I think it's sitting really deeply with me today is that I have been on this I continue on this healing journey in a lot of areas. This is one that is like so core to my own experience. And, you know, I look at the people that, you know, the people that I love. I look at the people I care about. You know, I'm thinking about my brother or my dad and like, you know, the people in my community that could experience this, and thinking about myself. Like I'm a runner. And so like these things feel very close to home, but it's also for me, this like really deep, because I'm on this journey, deep acceptance of self that has transformed me over the last, you know, 4 years. And then deep acceptance of all those who look like me, despite what I just shared earlier, which is some of the things that happen within our own culture.
There is such goodness in so much of what you said and so much wisdom. And I, you know, the one voice, the one story, you know, we're all unique. We all have our places that we came from and how we were brought up. You know, I was brought up in a really non-diverse neighborhood. I'd say 85% Jewish, 95% white. And it was all I knew growing up. Even through my college, you know, I went to a private school in the tri-state area, not diverse. And entering the workplace was my first experience of interacting with, being with people of color, different races, having friends who are different than I am. And it's so wild because you know you live in a bubble, but you just don't know. So that empathy that you're talking about and that connection, it's like, how do you experience it when you're not surrounded by people who are not like you, who don't look like you? And everyone's unique, right? And that's wonderful and beautiful. And that actually is what connects us as humanity is our uniqueness and brings us together as one. But how do you like cultivate that connection when you're not engaged with it on a day-to-day basis? And I never really even felt that or thought that until I was surrounded by people who are not like me, and how much I can learn and how much it's opened my eyes and how much more empathy I can feel and how much more connection I can feel. And I'm curious, like, as we, you know, move forward and as we get our voices heard and speak, like, how can we activate this connection between people who are, you know, quote unquote, different from one another, but, you know, without, you know, how can someone get that empathy? How can someone feel that? Like, what steps can they take? What can they do? And, you know, how can we just change things in that way? Like, I don't even know if there's an answer, but like, I guess that's what's coming up for me is like, I felt like I needed to be in a different space physically in order to cultivate this, and not everyone is. And it shouldn't have to be that way, I guess is what I'm saying.
So I heard a similar story, Jackie, earlier today, actually, about someone who had the same experience you had growing up in, you know, a really non-diverse area and, you know, then getting to work and having that be their first experience. So same as you. And I'm going to falsely extrapolate that that's probably the experience of a lot of people. And it also is what makes work such a powerful place to have this kind of conversation. And so like when I thought about posting on LinkedIn, I was like, ooh, should I not? The truth is, you're right. You said this earlier. We need to be having these conversations at work. The other truth is it's really important for people to do their best not to feel ashamed about where they're from, what people have told them in the past, their family history. You know, we all have our family members, right? Like, no matter what color we are, we've all had that. And so I think the shame is what blocks a lot of this, and it creates fear. And so it's like, well, if I'm ashamed, there's no way I'm going to let this demon out that maybe a cousin or a family member, someone I love, talks about people differently. And you have to, I think the remembrance is like, we are all here having been conditioned by a set of beliefs, not truths. And so it's just like, give yourself permission to know and forgiveness that doesn't mean these are truths. It means they're beliefs, and you have the power to undo them. And I think that's so much of our life's work, whether it be race or feelings about your gender or your belief system or your whatever, you have that power. And so, Jackie, I think the empathy first comes from forgiving yourself and your family, right? And like whatever you've experienced. And then it's looking at the other person. And I am one of my favorite spiritual teachers, Gabby Bernstein, talks about this, recognizing that the other person is you. Like how, just asking yourself, how might they be? We might look so different, but how might they be 2% like me? Maybe they laughed earlier today. I laughed too. Maybe they cried yesterday. I cried too. Maybe they just got dumped, me too. Like I don't know what it is. Maybe they just got a promotion. Oh my God, I want that too. Those are the little areas where we can kind of create some cracks that allow the light in.
I know our listeners can't hear, but I'm crying right now.
I'm definitely here.
Why? Because it's like, as a white woman, a person of privilege in many ways, like, I'm like, how are you doing? Like checking with you. And here you are, like educating me and like, telling me I should forgive myself from where I came from for beliefs that were conditioned for so many of us growing up, and it's like, here you are, consoling me in some way when I feel like I want to be here for you. And it just shows like how connected we really are, and it's, oh my God, like recognizing the other person in you, like how powerful is that? That's so powerful, recognizing that we are all human beings, that we are all unique and yet the same. And that is so, so beautiful.
Yeah.
And when we talk about why this is such a challenge in the workplace, I think you're right. Like individually, we carry around some shame around, privilege that we have or how we grew up or how we think we should be. And it's hard to know how to release that in the right way. People don't want to make mistakes. And I think what we're here to say is it is okay to make mistakes because you don't know if you don't try. You don't know if you don't ask. And by staying silent, you're not doing anything, right? And when we think about allyship, it is using your position to be a spokesperson, to be there for others, to ask the questions that are hard, to be vulnerable. It's like so impactful to have this conversation and feel like I can let my guard down, and I can trust you and you can trust me that we're both doing the best that we can,
Yeah. I mean, and I'm like, I've cried so many tears. I'm looking at you cry and I'm wanting to cry obviously so much. And like, here's the thing. I think most of the time we're afraid of anything. We like to ignore it. Right. And so it mounts and mounts inside of us. And then we find corners of our mind to push it into and close the closet door and say, I'll deal with that later. I don't have to look at that. And the last thing I want to do, and I think most people that look like me or are marginalized, we don't want to close the door on conversations, but I think there's fear everywhere on all sides. And so the last thing I want to do is create more separation. And I think we all do that when we close down, when we close it, and we put it in the closet. And so as someone who is a white female or a white male, the shame will be put in a closet too. We all put a lot of our shame in the closet. And that's why doing this deep work is really hard. But when you put your shame in the closet, you're also robbing us of your power. And that's the thing that I think is important to remember, like reframe, you're robbing the people you care about. You can think of someone you care about that may not look like you. They may not be Black. They may be, some other minority group, or they may be in the LGBTQA population. They could be in any of these areas where they're marginalized and discriminated against overtly and covertly. And so when you don't look at your shame and face it, you can't set it free. And then you can't be powerful for us. And your voice has more power in a lot of instances than my voice in America and in the world because of the way that it's set up. And so I share this with my team, like I would rather stumble through the awkwardness of a conversation and through the questions and through this and that than you not be empowered to go share what you know. And so like, we don't all want to be educators. No, we don't all want to have to tell every person that doesn't look like us why, our hair looks like this now because we can't get our hair done, or why, why we're afraid for our families, or why we have to have a specific type of conversation with young boys in our communities, and why we're upset, or why just saying, hey, just change your mindset isn't the answer, right? It's part of the answer. And I will say it is part of the answer, but it is not all of the answer. And so I just encourage anyone listening, like, please don't stop looking at this because you're afraid to face your own shame or the family shame you carry, because we all have it in some way, but you are powerful. And so are we, but your voice is the voice that often gets heard above mine. Because when I say something, people hear it and they thank me. And at the same time, in some instances, it feels like I'm just another Black woman saying what people expect me to say, right? So there is this element of importance that comes from you saying it.
Yeah. And thinking about the workplace and having this conversation with a team, posting on LinkedIn as an ally, or asking the questions and not wanting to come off as, can you educate me, or can you continue sharing what I need to know, quote unquote, right? Like, what do you see as being like a good way to go about this that feels genuine and, can make a difference for you and others and for our country?
A teammate asked about, they shared an experience of someone in their class who shared, as a Black man, he would walk down the street and he'd have to pretend to be overly friendly so as not to seem threatening. And that's a really common thing. I've seen it. I've done it. And I've grown up in mostly, I grew up in a mixed neighborhood, but my life has been mostly around people that don't look like me. And so it because of what has been said about the fact that Black people aren't safe, they're criminals, you should be afraid of Black men, there's this overcompensation. And he was like, what could I do to be a little different? Maybe I go out of my way to be kind. And I think that's one little thing you can do, is be agnostic in your kindness. Not everyone's going to respond and smile at you and wave. I mean, shoot, you and I live in New York. No one talks to each other, except I will say COVID seems to have changed that a little bit, at least in my neighborhood. But being agnostic with your kindness and with your heart will help so much. We aren't agnostic. We shut down. We don't want to learn. We aren't curious because we like our certainty in our worlds. And so, our beliefs are important to us, even if they're not great beliefs, because they keep our view and our perspective in place. And so it's scary to shatter a belief. But I would say, take a step out, be kind to someone. You don't have to go up to somebody and say, what's it like to be whatever right now, whatever marginalized group right now. Mm-hmm. You can just ask, how are you doing today? And I think you and I talked about this. It's a question that Adam Grant shared from Option B and Sheryl Sandberg. How are you doing today? And you can follow it up with, I know this has been a crazy time and I want you to know that I'm here. So that's one. More tactical are, I looked back, Jackie, and I was thinking back to history lessons. There's so much. I took African-American history, a number of times in high school and college, but those were the only classes that gave me the real truth of what's actually gone on. Like a lot of these classes that we all took as young adults were shifted and molded so that, you didn't have to open that Pandora's box of pain or shame or not knowing how to deal with what racism has looked like over the years. And what's been breeded by not talking about it is, this culture of people who say they're colorblind, or they're not racist because they don't use the N-word, or they're not racist because they have a Black friend. It's like, no, it's not binary. That's really important. Like being and I even remove the word racism, whatever you want to call it. I feel like that's such a triggering word. And so it creates this scary feeling for people who don't want to be judged as that. And so it's defensiveness that pops up instead of a conversation. And so whatever it is you want to call it that, but know that it exists and it's real and that it's a continuum, not binary. You might not be overtly racist, but see those in your family who are and go, oh, they're racist, so that means I'm not. That's not true. That means that you fall somewhere else in the continuum. So to educate yourself, like I think when I think about history, just know the truth. Like, we take so much of what's said as the truth. Just because it's said doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's written in a book doesn't mean it's true. But that's what we were conditioned to believe. So there's a really cool Instagram I just found this morning called Mockingbird History Lessons. And it's history lessons for adults. And her goal is basically to share not just Black history, but the history of marginalized groups with people in the hope that they can also share with their children what the truth is. And so like, I was really touched by that. And one I read because I read a lot of historical fiction around World War II. Like I love that. And one that was shared is in Germany after the end of the Holocaust, the Germans did so much to ensure that this would never happen again. And you obviously know this. Like, there were millions and millions of dollars in reparations paid. Children are taught at an early age how terrible this was, what an atrocity, how disgusting this was. And it's all there are no statues of Germans or Nazis around honoring them. We have that. We allow Confederate flags. We allow a lot of things. And I'm not to say that Confederate flag means you're a racist, but it triggers a time when that was really painful for people like me. And so what I think is important is that, people, I've heard these comments of like, well, for me, I'm someone who is privileged, right? And so that's part of the pain here too. Most of the people in America who look like me do not have my privilege. This is a really unfortunate situation where, I'm also trying not to feel shame about my own privilege, right? And recognizing that in any moment, any of my privilege doesn't shift what a cop or a police officer thinks about me. He doesn't know that I work at LinkedIn, or she, they don't know, and they may not care. So that's a big piece, is just understanding what the real history is and understanding why it's not that we are just not smart enough or just not educated enough or we're just not working hard enough or we just don't have intact families. Understand what's actually happened. And then you can see exactly why the story's played out how it has.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you make just so many good points. With the Holocaust, that was what felt like a very distinct point in time. It came, it went, they learned from it, and it doesn't feel that long ago. And so our generation, my German friends who I can have open conversations with about how they view Jewish people, it's different in that sense that, slavery and learning about what went on in our country hundreds of years back. I mean, this goes back decades and years and years and years of something that was built on a foundation to, these conditioned beliefs, so to speak, that we have to unravel person by person. And it's not a, flip of a switch, we're going to just do all that we can to compensate for this. There's so much embedded there. I think you make such a good point about educating yourself, not only of what's going on right now, which I think is really important. And you talked about how you shy away from, some of these videos and the news in general, because it's really hard to watch. And there's definitely truth in that. It's hard. And at the same time, there's a responsibility to be aware of what is going on so that you can speak to it, so that you can feel it, that you can feel the feelings of watching these videos that are so hard to watch, right? And so it's being aware and educating yourself on a day-to-day. But I love what you said about, finding intentionality behind learning about the past and where some of these things came from, because that's not something that at least I can say I do, and maybe something that's not talked about enough, but really understanding the origin and learning, like just learning about it. I also love how you mentioned the continuum. I know we talk about this a lot, how just life, everything, it's not binary. There's no black or white. Not everything is a yes or a no. I think everything in life is on a continuum, and recognizing that actually allows you a little bit of openness and liberation to know that there's a journey ahead of you and there's a journey behind you. Where I was 10 years ago is not where I am today with this, and where I'll be in 10 years is not where I am right now. And recognizing that it's a journey that you can choose to be on, and you can choose to educate and have these conversations and do your part in whatever way that is, and just to continue to grow with it and for that. that is what individuals can take on, is commitment to the journey of changing where we're at today. I mean, that's it. Leah, thank you so much. Like, this has been such a rewarding conversation to me. I know that's a weird word to put out there, but I feel very full right now that we can have this conversation and share it with our listeners, and other people can see that it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be scared, and recognizing it and choosing differently, choosing to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And one, thank you for being open and vulnerable. And like, this, as we shared at the beginning, like, we had a whole different plan laid out for today's podcast. And it wasn't until about an hour ago that we made a change. So we had no idea what was going to come up in this conversation. And yet, like, it actually reminds me of why we started this in the first place, was our own belief that we can have these conversations powerfully and openly and vulnerably, and, kind of be that vulnerability begets vulnerability, right? And so, like, you're a model by allowing yourself to be emotional. And I hope I'm a model too, by allowing myself to be emotional and to share. And I would say, we just recently had Mike Robbins, the author, on our podcast, and he said, don't waste a good crisis. He said that was some great advice he got. And this is a good crisis not to waste. Like, this is that good crisis not to waste. So find, for anyone listening, find the space you need to feel the pain or the fear or whatever it is, with the purpose of gathering your strength to be powerful.
Yeah. Well said, Leah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So hopefully this was either enlightening or affirming or powerful for whoever was listening. And, Jackie, you said something that's important that I want to leave people with, which is, this doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen. It happens in corners of the world. Like, if every person were to make a change in themselves and impact one person, this is how change starts. So don't put the weight of your world on your shoulders. It's just you, and it's just how you do things, and it's how you stand up for the people who matter when they need to be stood up for. And so allow that to be, like you said, the journey you choose to be on is your own growth, and be that example for other people.
Yeah. And I also just want to say, because you reminded me just about kindness, and you had said be agnostic with your kindness, which is just so powerful. But we are based in love, not fear, and we let our fears take over. And this is an instance where you can let your kindness and your compassion, your love take over.
Yeah.
And just choose that, right? Even if it's uncomfortable, but that is the way.
Yeah.
It'll always be the way.
It will. You're so right. Thank you, Jackie. And thanks to our listeners for joining us. You know where to find us. iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and we have a newsletter now. So if you want to take a look at that and find out what we're talking about and how we want to engage with you, we would love to hear from you. It's called In the Arena Podcast, and it's on LinkedIn. So all you have to do is type that into the search bar and you'll find us, and subscribe. We release it every 2 weeks. So you'll see the next one in 2 Mondays.
Have a great day, everybody.